going. Let's get going.
Steve Van Samson,
Curtis M. Watson,
Paul Christian Glenn, Joshua Rex, Raz, Rob Smith,
Hello, everybody. Thank Cthulhu. It is Sunday. Welcome to another episode of The Clutch of Personalities. And tonight we have with us the deliciously dark and diabolically delightful Dan Chichester. Everyone.
Hello, guys. It's great to be here. And what an awesome intro video to kind of follow. I feel like I'm part of something incredibly cool, which I am.
You're a superstar, and we love you, and we are so thankful for you for coming on the show, because we're going to have some fun tonight, guys. For those of you who follow us a lot, we often have author readings, and we have an entirely new approach tonight because Dan is doing stuff with comic books, and
Again,
so we get to kind of feel out and get to see. It's not exactly how you would do a pitch, but how the scripting and stuff is set up for the comic books that he does.
Ooh, fun.
So this is something that we haven't done before, and it's really exciting because we always love to explore new mediums of storytelling, and this is a brand new one for us on the show.
I'm excited to help you break new ground with that. That'll be fun.
And also, guys, right off from the beginning here, make sure there are two new projects going on. You have Daredevil Black Armor 2023, and
Yes.
if you guys are hanging out watching, mention something in the comments, say hi, ask a question, do something. I'll get you set up with, towards the end of the night, we're going to do the spinning of the wheel of merch, and some people will be getting some free digital copies of that pre-ordered for them. And also, check out the Kickstarter for the brand new Axles Infernal.
Please do. I love it. I like the scroll. Look at this. Perfect. And there's pictures. Wow, this is amazing. Look at that. I've done something right in the world.
We go in here, sir. It's not just we don't tell you. You have to see it. We're very visual here.
Look how beautiful this is.
Isn't it? Carl did a great job. Is doing a great job. Carl.
Oh yeah. I'm loving this. And he did a lot of work. I believe I was reading for Dungeons and Dragons and Magic the Gathering and stuff, as well as doing his comic book work, correct?
Yeah, I mean, he hasn't done a lot of comics since really the early 2000s, but he's done a lot of gaming work, TSR and Dungeons and Dragons, and Wizards of the Coast, and some Arabian games, actually. So he's been fairly active there and pretty, well known. So he's got a whole alternate push that he's doing more to his gaming crowd, where I take the back seat because he's the much bigger deal than I am over there.
Well, over there,
Over there.
We're gonna have to say that you're the big deal. And a couple of people found out that, and I actually did. Hey, Tom Brog, welcome. I had found out after I had met you at Terrificon, and this is terrible to say, but when I saw your booth and you were like, yeah, nobody ever asked about the Hellraiser and stuff, and I was like, oh my god, okay, yeah,
you met the one person who will.
Yeah, I and Drew knows this because he has got me in the past year learning all of my comic stuff, but the thing is, his names do not stick in my head ever. And I knew you from some stuff, but then when I went back to that, I was like, holy shit.
I was Hellraiser.
Yeah.
One of the quotes that lives rent free in my brain, which I was reminded of not too long ago, was Clive Barker saying Dan is the godfather of the Hellraiser comic. So yeah, right.
Wow. I mean, that's a Nicolas Cage. That's high praise. That's and
Exactly.
It's actually funny because essentially, Dan, to give context, I I have created in Carrie a Galactus where she is just hunger for new comics, and I'm her Silver Surfer, where I just have to. She's just like, go out and find me new worlds, and I find
That's
it's
awesome.
like, okay, this'll hold you over for a while. And then 2 weeks later, she's just like, no, that was good. So what else do you have? I'm like, my God, I've created a monster. Like,
She's devoured it
Ultimate
truly. Like in this.
Universe.
she plows through, so I have to give her like these huge arcs. But then of course she reads regular comics, but she went to Hellraisers. She studies it. It's like a hellish academia. She's just, she opens the box and you just have, Pinhead, or as Clive would prefer to call him, the priest. Just, we have such sights to show you.
Oh, great. Now she's going to solve it here while we're on here. I've seen this episode. This is,
Yeah.
No good comes of this.
Yeah. Carrie, please don't. Because I can't have one more thing just come up and no tears. It's a waste of good. See, that's the quote that lives in my head, rent free. It's a waste of good suffering. And people are like, you can do the voice. I'm like, I love the movie. Like, what is so hard about this?
I remember years ago, Doug Bradley came to a Marvel Christmas party. So obviously he's not in makeup, but we'd invited him and Nick Vince, and they'd come and just watching people like looking at Doug, like, I know this voice, I know the shape of the face. Who is this guy? Like, and the just, you could see them getting weirded out because they didn't know. Like, we were saying, oh, this is Doug Bradley from Hellraiser, and they're like, ah.
Well,
so
yeah, and it's actually funny because the same thing happened to him on the set of Hellraiser. People never saw him out of the makeup. So then he's at the rap parties and they're talking to him and like, oh hi, he's like, no, I know who you are. We just did a movie together. And they're like, I don't remember you. And then he just does, angels to some, demons to others, explorers in the realm. And he's like, they're like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. He's like, no, because he's wonderfully British. So he's got that dry wit, because I've met him too. And he's just very, thank you for your support. And it's just like,
quick side plug for Doug. What is he, like my 31st unofficial who doesn't realize it boyfriend?
Nice.
Yeah, I have a couple of them.
She's I feel like she has a rotation now. Like we're interviewing Howard Mackey this week.
I saw that. Yes.
And I keep joking, she just lost her mind with that. And I just keep saying, I was like, yes, so how is your hellish boyfriend? Is he's very nice? Oh, he's such a delight.
Howard.
Because Friday, you don't understand. At this con, I've never seen Carrie more lit up. It was like Christmas at Madison Square. Like she's lit up. She's just like engaged and everything. And these guys are loving it because apparently that panel, they were just asking them some generic things. Carrie comes in with these thoughtful questions. Like, oh my God, thank you.
Thank God for Carrie or Delphine. It was a life-saving moment because we were up there looking at each other. That panel was the worst.
Splash Pages, Dorking, we will go ahead. We're on Owlite right now, but since we two both are also on Splash Pages, you can always talk to any con organizer and say, we would really like to have them come over.
Yes,
and moderate our panels.
I will definitely be hitting up Mitch and letting him know that he can upgrade his panel moderators.
So about Moon Knight. Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what? Okay. So this was my favorite thing, and I'm sorry. I'm apologizing ahead of time to the gentleman who hosted the panel, but one person wrote. Well, okay. Howard wrote 3 issues of Moon Knight. You wrote none, which you stated at the very beginning.
Very clear.
And they kept going back to it. And then he was like, I know none of you actually wrote any of these things or had anything to do with these projects, but tell me what you thought of them. I was like,
the best part, I sent the clip to Howard. If you watch that panel, you guys put it up or somebody put it up, but it was he goes, and Terry Cavanaugh of Moon Knight and Howard Mackey of Ghost Rider and Terry Cavanaugh Like,
And Dan
and not
Dan
even
is here for
Dan, it
moral
was just like,
support.
I guess
You know,
so.
he's done stuff too, but he is
Clean the
we're
guy's waters.
Hey, Dan said Lilith first, and you got
Oh, I
Howard
did.
Mackey off the furnace. You know,
Oh
or-
yes.
yeah. But you know, and it's just so funny, especially because I've seen you know, at cons, like I'll post the videos and people are like, oh, who is this? And I'm like, oh, you don't know this person? Like they did all this work. And I've actually had to explain, like, you know, Dan, I've had to explain, especially in terms of Daredevil. I was like, well, you know, if you like Born Again, you would really love Fall of Kingpin because it's kind of Born Again in reverse. You know, and then, you know, I bring up Fall of Grace. I was like, he did a really good run back in the 90s. It was good stuff. And they're like, oh, wow, I had no idea. I'm like, well, now you know. So go
Now
forth and
they
read and send Dan more money, you know?
Starts with issue 292.
Or just enjoy it. You know, just enjoy it.
Yeah.
That's all I ask.
I started your run of Daredevil, and I noticed something, and this is going to sound weird, but I'm a fontaholic. And so letterers always interest me, and people are like, nobody cares about letters, but I read
do.
the issue before yours. I could tell because I went immediately. I decided to check out just to see what was being written before yours, because I'm not the biggest Daredevil fan in the world. As far as I haven't read, there's just so much out there. I haven't read it all, but I am familiar with him, and I noticed immediately that you changed letterers, and it was a very it changed that was the only thing that changed. It was you and the letterer, and it changed the entire dynamic of the comic just in that.
I didn't have anything to do with that. That would have been Ralph Macchio's decision. But lettering is the first guy I met at Marvel, and the person who sort of introduced me around was Phil Felix, who was an extraordinarily well-regarded letterer. So I have a very soft spot for letterers. For that reason, perhaps. But lettering is the sort of thing like sound in a movie that you don't notice it until it's bad and it's not working, right? When sound is working, it elevates the entire production, right? It makes everything that much more elegant or scary or meaningful or poised. Lettering is the same way. You know, amateur night lettering will ruin the best looking, best reading comic, and lettering that is on task will just integrate into the page, into the story, move you along, make your eye go in the right directions, and do the right things with sound effects. They are the great unsung heroes of many a comic page.
100%.
Yeah, you really have to get it right.
Well, because I agree with you, because I come from a theater background, so I always operate on the same principle. There's no such thing as a small part. It's only as small as you put into it. And it's funny because my friends, back when I was going to cons and getting like dozens of books signed, they were like, they would always joke like, they was like, okay, Drew got the artist, the writer, the letterer, the guy who inked the panel on page 63. And I was like, listen, everybody did their part and they deserve to get that cred. And, you know, the more I get it signed, that means the less reason it needs to leave my house. So, you know, it's less for me to carry, which means, you know, easier con. But I completely agree. And also, I think it's also great because you started kind of, you kind of juggled being both an editor and a writer, which is also something I know about. In college, I was an editor for our college comic. We published a comic, and I was the editor. And I remember the first year, I learned that this is a very difficult position because it's very great because you're running the show and everyone's looking at you to be the leader. But when things go bad, it's your head on the chopping block. And the first year we had a scandal because we had a story that was very erotic, very descriptive. Okay.
There you go.
And I had to catch the heat because literally I was asked, hey, do you want to be the editor? And I was like, sure. And then I was like, you saddled me this because this was coming, didn't you? And I was just like, I'm going to remember this. So I had to sit through a lot of, creative format should have a certain amount of liberty at a performing arts college where there's a naked issue. So I don't understand why we're all getting bent out of shape if somebody has, draws some very graphic sex.
Right,
So,
right, which probably every college student might have been somewhat familiar with themselves.
Thank you.
Going back to Hellraiser, for a second, the first issue of Hellraiser has a very striking story called The Warm Red by Jan Strnad and Bernie Wrightson, which I had, been excited to get that team up. And I was pulled into a meeting with sales and publishing, and they said, this is too much. This is too much. This is too graphic. This is too sexy. This is too dangerous for the first issue. We want you to hold this story back. We'll run it in another issue. And I put my foot down, not that it mattered, and I said, the book is called Clive Barker's Hellraiser. What do you think we were going to get?
Right.
This story nails it in terms of what we want this book to be, which it did. And I said, if you pull this story now, you will never run it. You will always find an excuse not to run this story. We have to go out of the gate with our guns blazing and our best foot forward if we're going to establish what this is. And it took, teeth gnashing and such. I didn't pull the Clive card on them. I just made the case internally and somehow wore them down. But, it's moments like that where you're like, well, why are we doing this?
Right.
This isn't Rebecca's Sunnybrook Farm. This is Clive Barker's Hellraiser.
Right. Well, when you started, you were working under Jim Shooter. You were an assistant to the assistant, and
Yes.
Jim was really known for when he started, he had the rules. It was, these are what you do at Marvel. These are how you do the stories and whatnot. And he did have a lot of criticism for it, but also during his time as an editor, there were a lot of great stories that came under his purview. The best example I could think of is Walt Simonson's run on Thor, which is still considered one of the best. So I just feel like you said, it's you have to know when to put your foot down, and it's not it's about the vision. And like you said, if it's too many cooks in the kitchen, you're getting all the voices. I was like, do any of you I was like, I don't recall you contributing pages. So
well, there is that. I mean, I enjoyed my time working, for Jim. But I mean, I really learned my craft working for Archie Goodwin, which was the Epic division that I was in, where I became an assistant editor and then an editor. And that's where I think, Drew, what you're saying about vision really came to the fore for me, because those books, by and large, were creator owned.
Right.
And so as an editor, and for a long time, I thought I was a better editor than a writer. You're working with people who own the properties, and they have visions. And what you're trying to do is keep them true to that vision. You're trying to make that vision happen, and then you're defending it. You're defending it to sales, to promotion, to other editors. And trying to kind of pull forward something that is not as quote unquote simple as the Marvel universe, right? You've got very different eclectic visions, whether that's Gru the Wanderer or Moonshadow or Steel Grip's Starkey and his all power tool. The name check, some strange things, or Clive Barker's Hellraiser for that matter.
Right.
And if you guys are interested in learning a little bit more about the rules and things behind Clive Barker's Hellraiser, it's on your story maze, isn't it?
Yes, I have a newsletter, which I've been inconsistent with, but which I will be getting back to being consistent with. But it's at storymaze.substack. No, Substack. That's Storymaze. Storymaze.substack.com.
We have here somewhere.
And if you subscribe to it, which is free, you get a bonus download of the original series Bible to Hellraiser, which is the document that we created at the time of creating the series, to outline what was different about the movies and the comic, and what were we looking for in the comic. This was the document that was sent out to artists and writers as a prospect to say, hey, come play with us, we have such sights to show you, if you will, come along. And it was show you. I love it. It's just so much fun. So that was a a really kind of effort of madness and love to create something like that, and then lure people in to try to get them to tell stories with us.
Jenny hasn't gotten a chance to say anything yet, but I know
Yeah, I was going to say, we're going to shut up. Jenny, you go.
Yeah,
Hellraiser too. So
Okay. I have loved everything I've read, but I wanted to know which story arc from Hellraiser was like your favorite. This is where we want to be storytelling arc that you saw in the series.
That's a great question, and you know, most of the stories within the Hellraiser as the anthology weren't arcs so much, right? You know, they were singular stories. And sometimes writers or artists would come back to certain characters and pick up on them. But I think that I was really fortunate and lucky in establishing kind of right out of the gate what we wanted the book to be. And the two stories that stand out to me are that Warm Red one, which was Jan Strnad and Bernie Wrightson, which is a very erotic, dangerous, nasty little bit of business, you know, when somebody gets sort of seduced into the Cenobites world, and a new Cenobite that Jan and Bernie had created called Face. And then also in that story, totally unexpected, was Ted McKeever's story, which was and I'm blanking on the title of it, but the concept will always stay with me, which was a woman who was pregnant had solved the puzzle box, been dragged to hell, but her fetus, I think it was called Dream of a Fetus or something like that. But the fetus, you know, comes drifting up out of her, and it's in the very Ted McKeever sort of way, if you know his artwork and style at all. And it starts questioning the Cenobite. Well, what about me? You know, where do I belong? And the Cenobite's like, I don't know. You know, like it's like you didn't solve the puzzle. You're not really born. You're not really dead. I can't tell you. And it was this very strange, very Ted McKeever, you know, sort of story that was lyrical and scary and disturbing and beautiful all at the same time, much again like Ted McKeever. So to me, it took things in a different direction than I was expecting, which was the challenge in that Bible that we talked about a second ago. That Bible was like, don't just tell us morality plays, just don't tell us open the puzzle box and things go wrong. So those two stories became, in a lot of ways, my high watermark. We didn't always hit that, but they were the ones that, to me, I always wanted things to aspire to.
Right.
And Dance of the Fetus, by the way.
Dance of the Fetus. Thank you. Yep.
Yeah. And actually, Jenny, before I speak, do you have anything more? I really do not want to talk over you.
I did have one more comment.
Go for it, girl.
The whole series brought so many fresh hells to mind, but it also brought thought-provoking ideas that you would have never thought about. Like from the clown being constantly brought back over and over to doing his stick and torturing the kids, to are you going to give in, or are you going to make a deal with the Cenobite? What are the ramifications of that, and where is it going to take you? Did you have any, reading any of the ones that you have read throughout the series, did you have one idea that you got from any of the stories that just threw you off guard, that you had never actually thought about the ramifications of what could happen in that situation of the story?
You know, I was so close to it, and so ingrained sort of in Clive's world in a way. I don't know that it threw me off, but I was always inspired by the levels of talent when people would really bring their A game, right? Sometimes people would bring their meh game. And sometimes we would buy those stories and sort of regret it later. But I'm trying to think if something jumps out at me. You know, some individual illustrations, because we had these sort of, you know, you obviously know the book, but we had these individual illustrations that sort of were not filler pages, but they were bumper pages, which is like standalone Cenobites or moments like that. And I remember Kevin O'Neill's version of a Cenobite, which was this sort of, if I remember correctly, this sort of gloriously epic kind of character with his head back and razors just running all over him in this very sort of comfortable, beautiful, disturbing way. I remember seeing that and just feeling very refreshed in a hellish sort of way when that kind of came in.
Well, with Kevin O'Neill's style, I can believe that. I mean,
yeah, and it's but I wish I could say that I'm I remember some more of the stories more specifically to say that what sort of stood out, but nothing's jumping to mind right now.
Well, Dan, save it for later, man. We have our interview with you later in the month. Hold your strength, man.
My brain is just wired on critical thinking right now because I have little ones, and sometimes I have to make them stop and think about what they can learn from the situation, so they don't make the same mistake later. Because it's like, oh, we found out what that does. Right? Is it something we want to replicate, or do we want to try something different? That sort of thing. So my brain automatically went to analyzing in a way of, well, that is a different way to look at that particular type of hell. But yeah.
the hell, though, that I will say in terms, now that you're bringing it up as a lesson, though, from an editorial point of view, was I was juggling Hellraiser along with several other books, that I had to edit. So you're always critically on task to meet the deadlines and get things out and so forth and so on. If I could go back, and I don't have many regrets in life, thankfully, knocking on wood as I say that, but there were certain stories I think I bought just to kind of keep the queue filled, because especially as an anthology, you're trying to kind of get ahead of things. You're juggling many different teams and many different page counts, and you're trying to kind of collect them all together and get them going. And I wish I had held more of the stories up more critically to those high watermarks and said no more often than saying yes just to try to fill the queue. I mean, I said yes thinking that some things were going to come together, and many did, but there were certainly places where the stories were less elegant, less moist, less eerie or pushing the envelope than they could have been or should have been if I had been better able to think that through. I think that's a learning lesson that you come at after the fact.
It's terribly hard to follow up Clive Barker or to step in his world and do it well. And you did a wonderful job, and I think a lot of people that you chose and that you put in did great things. And once again, we're going to get into your new stuff. That's why we brought you here.
Sure, whatever you guys want.
We're giving people some background here because we're also going to have you Drew and I will have you on the 22nd, 24th, something 24th. Like that.
Later this month, you will be on the show.
Yes, I will.
I'm getting you again.
Yeah.
But what was it like to be with Clive Barker? I mean, did you talk on the phone? Did you hang out?
All of the above. Yeah, he was it wasn't terribly hard to follow Clive Barker because he was right there alongside us. He was the best possible collaborator you could possibly imagine. Incredibly imaginative, as you would imagine, but also just very giving, and in the way that he would approach things. It wasn't my way or the highway or my Cenobite, not yours. There was always a free exchange of ideas. There was always a lot of trust. I think we established the trust by what we were doing early on. He could see we were in tune with where, his world, and we wanted to push it further, which I think meant a lot to him. And I think that let us kind of go further. And then that would be him suggesting, all right, so what are you're doing Hellraiser. Now you're going to do the Nightbreed adaptation. Now you're doing a Nightbreed Hellraiser story and you're writing it, and those types of things. And so, we talked at least once a week, because I was running the stories by him or sending him stuff for his approval. It seems, and then very often, if I was in the area, and there was a reason I stopped in at his homes a couple of times, and what always stood out to me was one time I was at a convention, and he was at the convention. Oddly enough, he was the bigger draw, and but I don't even think I was at the convention. I was just visiting it, and he was doing a signing, and two things stood out to me. One, he had a line a mile long, as you could imagine, and that it was gonna shut down at whatever 4, say, and he said, no, just keep them coming, and he stood there right to the end of it. But the other thing was, he sort of waved me in. He said, oh no, you come sign and do some stuff with me too, and he introduced me to all these people, and which was just a very cool sort of thing, to have Clive Barker say, hey, no, come sit next to me, and we'll shoot the shit and talk while these people are coming by, and if they're into what you're doing, then you're part of the show too, which he had no reason to do, but it was a great dynamic, and I was very, very fortunate to be able to play in that space with him for such a long time.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm gonna steal. Raz isn't here, but he's the other half of my brain, so I get to use his stories every now and then.
True.
He was at a con once and met this person while waiting to speak to Clive Barker, who talked to him for a little bit, and then was like, you aren't going to get up there. Just bring your stuff. Come have dinner with me and my partner. We're going to be doing this. And he's like, okay. It was Clive Barker's partner at the time. So he took him and had him sit down, and so he got to sit and of course signed his stuff or whatever, and got to sit and have dinner with, and then ask any question. He didn't want to. He had polite conversation as well, instead of just drilling him over a meal. But
right.
Like,
oh no, it was fabulous conversationalist. So that sounds like the type of partner that Clive would choose. And let's make no mistake, Clive was still twisted and crazy in all the best ways. There's not just this nice guy, but let's not ruin his reputation here. But no, fabulously charming, exotic, provocateur, just right on the money for what you would expect of somebody like that.
I have 3 sages that I refer to right now, and that is Clive Barker, may he rest in peace, Terry Pratchett, and Neil Gaiman. And those are the 3 large authors, bestsellers, that I think are some of the best storytellers of our age. I don't know.
Good combination. Great combination.
And that's something I like. I'm gonna cover your phone number up here, but on your business card, for those you can read it, storyteller. I love that.
Thank you. I debated that for a while. I'm glad you liked it.
Yes, this is on the back, folks.
And that's Bill Sienkiewicz on the back. Yeah,
showing off her swag from Terrific Con. But a few things.
Number one, the storyteller aspect is very important. Well, I love that.
I will say this, Dan. First thing, I don't know if you, as you're telling the story, I noticed Carrie's face, and she's just smiling because she's just thinking, one day I'm gonna get my chance, and I'm gonna lose my goddamn mind when I meet Clive Barker. I am gonna fangirl so hard internally because there's it's very nice to meet you. I'm so happy, and then deep down, it's just dying.
I fanboyed out when he came to the offices of Marvel. We had a Mark Chiarella was who would go on to become a big deal at DC for good reason.
Yep.
But was our receptionist at Epic. He was our receptionist at Epic because he just wanted to be in the building with comics. He was the most overqualified receptionist of all time. But he was the one who would typically go out and meet people coming into the office.
Right.
Some so-and-so's coming. Mark would go out and meet them and escort them back to the Epic offices. So when Clive came, I literally squeed, it was like, no, and pushed poor Mark out of the way to like rush, my way to the front. By the time I got to the front, I was like composed. It's like, oh, Mr. Parker, I'm Dan Chichester. It's like you could give two shits. He was there to meet Archie Goodwin,
I had a similar reaction when I met Mike Mignola at like an art event. I just walked up and was like, "Are you Mike Mignola?" And he was like, "Sometimes." And I was like, "Okay, give me one moment." I'm a big fan. I traveled so far and so quickly to see you. Would you mind? He was like, "Oh yeah, I'll sign whenever you have." And I'm like, I should have brought more. I was like,
can always bring more.
I know, but
I have a trunk full.
Yeah, but but I feel like, and it's funny because I tell this to people that I've had some amazing experiences at horror conventions, meeting horror people. Like a good majority of the time, horror writers, actors, makeup artists, they're some of the most polite, down to earth, zany weirdos. It's like the lunch table I used to sit at. We all became famous. I'm just like, we all went, and then those kids made fun of us that work at McDonald's. So I was like, there you go, justice was served. Justice
was served.
Yeah, one. But I think the thing that I also really appreciate, because of somebody, I started reading the Hellraiser comics. I wonder who that could have been. But I think the thing that I really liked is that you guys did something that I feel that the films didn't, in which they played it safe and told stories that fit although they kept going back to Christy Cotton. I was like, leave the poor girl alone. Like, she suffered enough. Just leave her the fuck alone. You guys filled in blanks in the history because, as you saw with Bloodlines, which is good for the history, but not a great movie, the history, these guys have been around for a long time. So that's a lot of stories. And again, yes, you see Pinhead, Chatterer, the one that always licks his lips, Butterball, freaks me out. The female, but there were others, and it's the same thing. Like, I felt like Mike Mignola could just keep doing Hellboy till he can't draw no more, because there's always more stories to tell all the time. There's always more Hellraiser, and that's what I've just enjoyed. I was like, you guys are filling in the blanks, and it's just, everything makes sense, versus when you watch a movie and these characters are acting so out of, changing the script. You're like, I don't think Jason would do that. As I'm wearing
my Jason, shirt today. But, and I don't like any of the Jason movies except for Cocaine Bear, which I think is the best Jason movie ever. That was the point of doing the Bible, right? That was the whole thing. We knew we could not just keep repeating the movies,
right?
And that the movies were going to do the movies fine or not fine. They were going to do whatever they were going to do. We didn't want to do a movie adaptation. We wanted to go beyond the movies, and and that was the first discussion and charge with Clive, and that's why we got together with him and a few other players, and we hashed these things out, and then I had the chance to filter it down and contextualize it, and I think that the folks who took that charge and ran with it are the ones who really saw the opportunities. Is there hell off planet? Is there hell in the past? Is there hell down the road? Is it small hells? Is it big hells? What's going on? And people really did find places to create some really weird, disturbing things with it in the best of ways.
Yeah, of course.
No, and I'm gonna, since we're talking about the movies, there's been a lot of controversy over the new release movie,
the Hulu one,
the one that's the brand new one that Barker was involved with, the female Pinhead. Everybody freaked out. But before that, the last one in the original series had to do with going back to the house, and they, like, people were talking and their sins were being fed to them as the guy typed and everything. I don't know if you've seen that one or not.
I have not. No.
I
think I stopped with 4.
A lot of people.
Good call, man. Good call. Ignorance is bliss.
Then this is going to make too much sense, but I actually, for those of you who are watching that have seen it or have not and are interested in it, I actually thought was a very good film. The only problem was they brought Pinhead into it. and it was very much a Hellraiser story. It was very following the thing, but as there are so many other Cenobites. Pinhead is the leader of the Order of the Gash, but there's all these others out there. They could have grabbed anybody, and just for marketing purposes, they pulled in Pinhead.
Of course.
Well, that's it, right?
And it was just like,
I mean, that would have been the failings, quote unquote, of the movies, in the sense that it Pinhead had to become a recognizable icon, right? He was the face of Hellraiser, but that's the way a lot of movies work, right? It's very difficult to sort of say it's part of a larger mythology. We had that license, right? We could throw Pinhead on the cover. Sometimes we did, sometimes we didn't. A lot of times we didn't.
Right.
I'm thinking, but maybe I should have put him on the cover more. Maybe it would have sold better. I don't know.
And you had the face too, which was a great character, by the way.
Oh, I loved Face. Yeah, Face was that. Yeah, I loved him to death.
And there's Belbalith, the librarian.
Yeah, I mean, we started. Yeah, they're pretty Balbarith. I always pronounced it, but that's just
okay.
Me.
Yeah. Well, but I feel like that's why I enjoyed like the Hulu Raiser, as I called it. Because like again, horror movies have to follow a certain formula. Unfortunately, that's just their storytelling. Like that's the Jacob Marley chains that they carry. But I think for me, as a fan of the original two, which I still think are the closest to Clive Barker's vision, I thought they did a great job with. I mean, the Cenobites look great, and I felt like
you're talking about the Hulu Raiser one.
Yeah,
right?
the Hulu Raiser.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I thought like, and again, people, because I remember people, of course, criticizing that it's a female Pinhead. Yet there have been so many women who have cosplayed as Pinhead. So I was like, so you like that photo, but you're going to criticize this person who's doing essentially the same thing, except getting paid for it. But they had all the other ones, and I thought they looked great. I was like, these things are terrifying. Like there was one or two that even I was like, no, thank you. Like pan away, nightmares.
I mean, not nonsense. Who cares if she was a female or what?
Right,
she was,
exactly.
But does the movie add up?
Right, exactly. And I thought it was I always see remakes as it's a chance for new audiences, the little ones, as Jenny would put it, growing up and discovering it. And I was like, wow, this is a remake. What was the original like? Here we go. So you get the best of both worlds. You have the new and the old. And essentially, as Dan put it, since there's so many levels to this hell, then they can exist. It's the same thing with how everybody gets up in the arms about different versions of heroes. I was like, it's a multiverse. There's literally one for everybody. Shut the fuck up.
And there's also when they introduced the new Lament configuration, how there were the 7 different configurations.
Yeah.
And what you guys did was you didn't just get there through a puzzle box. The one who joined Face in his order from Nam, I believe it was, who crawled through a certain specific series of tunnels.
Atkins, named after Peter Atkins, but, the filmmaker.
The Cenobite with the machine gun.
Yes, yep. But there was one, I can't remember, might have been R.J. Leficier who wrote it, but there was one that was a building. You had to walk the building in a certain way. So the puzzles were the intention of focus and discipline, right? That was the key that Clive gave us to unlock. So much of the thinking about the Cenobites early on was they are disciplined. They are, everyone thinks of hell normally as chaotic, right? No. This pandemonium, right? That was the classic version of hell. Everything's crazy and burning and insane and lunatic. And Clive's thing to us in that first meeting, when we were talking about what the hell is Leviathan? What is all this stuff and these things? And, he said, it's discipline, right? It's discipline. And clearly there were many things. And then I would research these and get into my own readings about, scarification and S&M and bondage, things that were influential, perhaps to the visual creation of certain of these things. But that sense of discipline is what unlocks the puzzles, right? not just focusing on like the twisting of that little dial and that thing that you almost like took us down the dark path with, Delphine. But anything, any focus, right? The simplest focus, if it's so intense, could be the puzzle that has been left there for the obsessed person to then push aside all else in life and devote themselves to this, which is what unlocks the offer. Come with us now. Come see what you've got.
And we're hitting 45 minutes in, and we have not yet got to your Kickstarter. So,
do that.
Speaking of hells,
speaking of hells,
I'm going to show, if you don't mind, real quick, the video.
Sure. If you want to play it, great.
Yes, you guys can have an idea, and then
Sweet.
You have some scripts, and I have the artwork for them, so I can put that up while you're doing some reading for us. When we
all right. So,
roll it, Carrie.
So let me scroll down there. Here we go. Check this out, guys.
Here's what I know. When you've lost your way, it gets easy to lie about the hard truths. My name is Percy Cross, and I've done some sinful things. I'd like to think they were for the right reasons. But the way to hell is paved with good intentions. So if you're going to drive that road, you better be damn sure you pick a good ride.
Wow, that's self-serving, isn't it? And
shut up and take my money. I mean, great.
And for those of you that are too lazy to copy paste, go ahead and you can scan that QR code right there.
Scan that code right there. Yes, we're going to launch on Tuesday, but you can get the notifications.
Yeah.
And you're going to get this stuff. Oh my God, it's gorgeous.
Oh my God.
The rig. I love the rig.
Take that money.
So, yes, and I believe I saw on your posts on your page that the first 48 hours of your launch, there's some special.
There are, yeah. I'm figuring out the whole Kickstarter thing and stumbling my way through it, but it was advised by folks who've done this a few times. The first 48 hours, I believe you can get the comic and a cool little holographic, sticker.
Oh boy!
Which normally is like a little bit more of a cost for a reduced cost together, and then also if you want just the comic, the print comic, there's going to be an early bird special. I sound like Walmart, it's Kmart special, but an early bird special of a limited number. I think it's 50. The first 50 people want the print comic, get it for a reduced amount, and then the first 50 people who want a special version of the PDF, the electronic comic, that has the art and my script. So they're kind of embedded together. So you can get, the full comic, but it's kind of interlaced with the written scripts. You can sort of get an idea of how did Carl interpret certain things and where did he not interpret certain things, and how does that work? Which I thought was an interesting, take.
Yeah, I was listening to Chichester Chats the other night. The episode.
They did a nice job.
Oh yeah, it was wonderful. And you were saying this is a long project in the making.
It is. Yes.
It is a work of love and hell, and I love that. So
my hair was much darker when we started this. Yes. Yeah, it's a long time. It was something originally conjured up really back in 99, 2000, and it came to life in a very full-formed way, but timing didn't work out for me and Carl, and we sort of lost track of each other, and And then, but it was that sort of story for me that was always there. It was kind of like, damn, that was the one that got away. And when Carl and I reconnected about 5 years ago or so, it was almost simultaneously. We both said the exact same thing. Remember that girl on the road trip to hell and back, and the girl being Percy Cross, who we just saw that little piece of. And I had just read Elizabeth Gilbert's book, Big Magic, which is a great creative inspiration book. If you haven't read it, I highly recommend it. And one of her conceits in that book, which I've taken to heart, is that essentially ideas exist as real things, and they will come and visit themselves upon you. And if you are smart, you do something with it. You make a video, or you write it down as a poem, or you write it down as a story, and you manifest it into something. If you are stupid, you let it get away, and then you find 6 weeks later somebody else has done the exact same thing, and then they get all the credit for it, and you go cry in a corner. So I say to Carl, this is it. Like, this is the chance to do this or not do it. So let's stop screwing around. And there's been little fits and starts along the way to get to this point, but now is the point when it's ready to kind of be a real comic book.
All right. So, would you like to do our new version of a reading? I can.
Yeah, I mean, do you want to do I think the splash is maybe do you want to do the multi-page thing I sent you, or you want to do the splash page?
Whichever you would like. I can show the artwork for all of them so people can just see how beautiful it turned out.
Sure. Why don't you do that, and I'll do the reading from the splash page, if that's okay, because I kind of like that one a little better.
Okay.
But unless you prefer the other one, you tell me.
If you want to do the splash page, do the reading for the splash page. If you want to quickly kind of just explain what's going on in these other ones,
yeah,
briefly.
You want to flash those up first? And I'll kind of like take you through it. Okay, great.
Yeah.
So Percy Cross is our morally compromised heroine, and what we're seeing here is the beginning of the story. She's a drifter. She's a grifter. She makes her way, through life, basically stealing and conning, and we don't know why. We don't know why she's on the road. But in this scene, we're going to establish, we've already seen her do some morally questionable things, but in this scene, this little girl who's sort of running across the road here with her little light up sneakers is going to be in severe danger. And we're going to learn something about Percy, two things, actually. In the page that follows, there's a little bit of this scene here. The way that it's tinted out here, and what happens is we sort of get to understand that Percy has not a superpower, but a kind of an observational ability to sort of look and see and track things that are going to happen. And she quickly intuits that if this girl is left on her own devices, running after this balloon, her parents not paying attention, bad things are going to happen. With sneakers flying and balloons popping, and it's not going to be a good day for the girl or the parents. And she's really there. There's nothing I can do. It's going to happen too fast. I can't save this girl. There's nothing I can possibly do. And yet what will happen in the page that follows is she will do that. And we start to understand, that, you can see her sort of like running to the potential rescue. She puts herself into motion because that's sort of both her good character and also, I'm going to say, part of her fatal flaw. She has to save the little girls, and that's something that gets her in trouble in one form or another, time and time again. It's really the classic, the road to hell, is paved with good intentions, here. But it also gives us a different look at the character, who up to this point was just a very attractive kind of grifter, and it really opens the door to what happens next, which is the appearance of that truck that we saw, which is the transport of something called the Underworld Transportation Authority, because the key underlying premise of this whole book and this whole storyline, this whole world, is that there is a multiplicity of hells, not just one hell, not a multiverse, please, no, but a multiplicity of hells, which there are across different cultures, the Aztecs had one hell, the Mesopotamians had a hell, Dante's got a hell. Some are worse than others, some are better than others, some are barely hells at all. But they all want to be believed in. And so the Underworld Transportation Authority's job is to deliver these hells onto Earth so that belief becomes more firmly enriched in our earthbound populace. And when belief is there, the stakes and the cred of that hell gets raised up. But for various reasons, it has to be humans press ganged into service that have to deliver these hells. It's not just, they can just like say, demon, whatever, you deliver that hell. It has to be brought across by these various drivers. And so she gets pulled into being the co-driver of that enormous rig, which is called Smoking Sammy.
Okay. So you ready for the splash page?
Yeah, let's go for the splash page and we'll do the dramatic reading.
Okay.
So, interestingly enough, and this is a very unusual kind of thing. I mean, I wrote this full script, right? So we'll talk about this when we get to the Daredevil stuff as well. Comics can be written in a couple different ways. Comics can be written as plots, where you describe a general situation, then the artist interprets it in different ways. Or you can write it page by page, panel by panel. So you say page 1, this would be page 20 and 21. And then you describe it, and you write the script at the same time. And that's how I did this. Although Carl being Carl, he had to make it more difficult for me because he wanted leeway to move things around. So when I wrote the script, I wrote it I specifically said script for 18 pages. Carl had the latitude to then move things around to 20 pages or ultimately 22 pages, which created some issues with the storytelling that we had to address as we got to the scripting. But the description here is over the shoulder shot of Percy looking out the front window. So Sammy roars across the spread, arcing toward the camera in a wild, ferocious, forced perspective that should have readers leaping back from the pages. In charging out of our reality, the truck now travels the hell roads, twisting paths of rubble, fire, energy, offal, tentacles, and worse, that weave together in a cracking ribbon under Sammy's tires with off ramps spinning off into the darkness. Surrounding the transport from all angles, up, down, sideways, are the faces of hell, representatives of the underworlds across time, space, and culture. There are glimpses of the Viking hell, surrounded by black ice ravens, a Hieronymus Bosch hellmouth munching souls from a medieval Christian hell, Sumerian beasts, Greek Cerberus, Egypt's imperious Anubis, Japanese monsters prance in their fundushi underwear. There's a classic tortured Satan of Dante or Milton, fiery Muslim devils, animal-faced terrors from Buddhist underworlds, alongside the tusk-faced Hindi fiends, the skull-faced, I'm never going to try to pronounce this guy, of the Aztecs, even mad, crazy things that are a fever dream of carnival dark rides or some kind of future space demon from another galaxy. Detail is not important so much as range. This is a lot more than a couple of Satanists wearing an upside-down cross and a set of legend-inspired cosplay horns, although that could be here too. All their eyes, multiples in some cases, are on Sammy, some with hungry interests, on a pickup or delivery, others with disdain. And above it all, floating in the dark and flames, is the face of Necros Terminal, eyes on his favorite delivery vehicle, his expression, tick, 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 time's a wasting. Inside Sammy's cab, Virgil's got both hands on the wheel, eyes ahead. He's seen this and worse and knows he's got to keep eyes on whatever the road is to get where they're going. But for Percy, this is all new. Mind-searing, jagged snippets of hallucinatory horror that's got her pressed up against the glass with the what the fuck look of all what the fucks. And then the captions, which aren't on this page yet, are Percy saying, "Here's what I know, never take rides from strangers." So that's kind of what it was supposed to be. And I think that's mostly what it is.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
But interestingly, and I know, Delphine, when we talked about this show initially, you said this was like more about kind of creativity and storytelling, than other things. So I think that's this page, and the reason I chose it, aside from the fact it looks fucking awesome,
it does.
This is a really great example of creative interchange and sometimes going the wrong way, because for various reasons, I wrote the 5 issues that make up this first story arc a while ago. And it took Carl a while to kind of get up to steam to get to this point, right? Whatever the reason there. But in doing that, he kept putting this spread off. He kept putting it off and putting it off and putting it off. Right. And so, because he felt so much was on this spread that he just, I'll get to it. But he was psyching himself out, right? Totally psyching himself out. So there's a version of this spread that he did, which is perfectly serviceable. It's okay. It's good. And he sent it to me, as we were going through the pages. And I looked at it and I was like, okay, maybe I'm missing something. And I called him and I was being all diplomatic and like, hey, let's talk about the spread. And his first words were like, yeah, it sucks. I said, wait a
Did not
minute.
Say that.
Forget it. I'm taking off my blinders here and, taking off my diplomatic, filter. Because if you're not into it, then I'm not into it, right? If you were into it and I'm missing something. But that was an example of, how easily creatively, I think, you can psych yourself out by pushing things off instead of throwing yourself in. And once we sort of had that discussion and reoriented, him around this, that's when he came back with this. And then my reaction was, welcome back to the book, Carl. And that's like no disservice on Carl's talent, which is extraordinary, but it's I think how easy you can take yourself down the wrong creative road by making just a simple choice. I'll get to it later, as opposed to diving into it now.
Right.
Yeah, I feel very sorry for some tattoo artists in the future, because that is going to be hard to be.
That is going to be a pain in the ass to do.
That's a back tattoo, man.
That's totally a back tattoo.
That's a full back thing.
And it's the whole time I'm seeing this truck here, the red lights and everything, and I was like, oh, Dan, please don't do a Maximum Overdrive crossover, for the love of God, because I'm just seeing evil, Peterbilt, and I'm just like. I was like, he's very fond of crossovers with these things. Please don't. Like
that is not where my mind went at all. I have a kid named Dante, if that tells you how much I love this sort of thing. And B, being a truck driver's kid, I can see all the places that you could go with this and all the different ethnicities, cultures, ethnicities, and the different variations each of them have on the same things that you could go with this, because you can drive in certain parts of the country and go to little locales of
you're so right
places, and you could use because what one person sees as the same hell is not always what the other person has in their mind. So there's so much you can do, and I can see where this can go, and I am so looking forward to finding out what you actually do.
Thank you for picking up on that so wonderfully and articulating that way. I mean, that's how we've always sort of seen this, is like there's almost more in the small deliveries than the big ones, if you will. And while Carl was getting up to speed and doing this, I actually started writing these small 8-page little delivery stories, just to kind of tease him along even further. And it was exactly those stops. What happens if he goes to the roadhouse? If they have to go to a roadhouse here, what if happens if they have to go to one of those gated communities down in Florida? What happens if they stop at like an old 5 and dime, dusty 5 and dime, from nowhere. And there's these different places that can be, just wonderfully interesting representations of big deliveries or small deliveries. And, and it's while I would have in some ways loved for this to have come out many a year ago, I think it's so much better now, because I think many a year ago it would have just been more of a beast of a story. And by that I mean there's plenty of action in it, there's plenty of flames, there's plenty of what you just saw, but the flow of it is really, just as Carl says, much more bizarre now, because we sort of let the roads of hell kind of unfold in a different way, and we let Percy kind of go along with it and then take charge of it in a certain way as she has to, but not completely, right? She's going to go along on this and not solve everything by the end of issue 5 as we get to that. This Kickstarter right now is just to fund issue number 1, just to be clear. But we have, and it's done. It's done. The issue's done. It's all lettered, colored. Wes Wong is the colorist.
Nice.
Great Pat Brousseau is a terrific letterer. Did the lettering. Richard Starkings and Comic Craft did the logo, which I love. So it's all ready to kind of rock and roll. But we're very excited for it. So I'm glad to see you guys, responding to it as outsiders, if you will, in the right way. I thank you.
Yeah. No, I what Jenny's saying is the same thing as me. Shut up and take my money. Okay.
Exactly. If my dad was alive, I'd buy him a copy too.
Yeah. That's the equivalent of in a movie when they're like, I'm in.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
Let's go.
Stop talking, Dan.
Dan, write issue 2. Let's go. Like,
it's done. It's done. Carl's off to the races too. Yeah.
We'll start doing like plan issue 10 now. Let's go. This is gonna,
Are you going to do some of the little eight-page ones in like an anthology format of different?
Well, I was thinking about that, and we want to get through this first 5 issue story. I think it's important to kind of, because it sets so much of the world. It has to kind of go through that, I think, before we can start doing that. But Carl's been, while he's very possessive of this stuff, as you might imagine, he's been the first one to kind of say, if we do this right and we open this world up, other people might want to play with these characters in this world.
Right.
So I think an anthology of whatever, say 4 8-page stories, would be a great bumper between big storyline 1 and big storyline 2, and
totally.
Actually, getting 3 other artists in addition to Carl to or maybe it's just all 4 artists and let Carl focus on the next one. Dean Kotz, who's done Black Hammer and Krampus, has done our alternate cover for this, the variant cover. It was the first time seeing somebody else do anything with these characters, right? Which was really weird and exciting, at the same time, because we've been living with this in our little bubble, and suddenly like somebody else getting it like right away as soon as Dean said it, saw it, he was like, oh, that's that, and that's cool, and wow, that's really wild, and then jumping in and taking his interpretation on Percy and Virgil, who's the main driver, and Necros, who is the dispatcher from this underworld transportation authority.
So I'm assuming Virgil is, we're both. Is Virgil an intentional reference?
Yeah. You think with my 2x4 sensibilities, yes, Virgil is an intentional references, and I'm gonna give you 2 guesses where Percy goes to.
Like I said, it was on Dante.
There you go. But so not in the old days, I would have probably been much more heavy-handed in the equivalencies of these things, which is why I'm much more refreshed, I think, where I am as a writer now, to sort of play with what we've set up in those, call them analogies or whatever, a Persephone or a Virgil, but not being slaves to it, right? It's just their little touches and their little teases, and if you get it, that's great. There's a running gag actually, like through it, where Necros, who is that dispatcher, is always calling her Persephone, and she's always correcting him. It's Percy, and she does it back at him and calls him Nicky, and he says it's Necros. It's like so, but it's a fun little play.
I fall into the same trap sometimes when I'm doing my writing, and I'm not the rock star that you are, so I have no cred whatsoever. But
Carrie, you're doing good. Calm down.
No, but this is a reference to something he said the other night, was that someone had told him, yes, we understand that you're quite well read. You don't need to prove it to the world. But I do like that you kept in some of the references too, like throw out anything that's extraneous, but leave in the Easter eggs for the rest of us who are like everybody here will probably catch everything that you mention or have a brief reference to because we're all readers. So
Well, that's the thing, and that was my very good friend Greg Wright, who was the first person who read the original proposal, 100 years ago, and the original proposal, was me blathering on, like, kind of, and like, all these references and all this kind of stuff, and he's like, get to the point already, and that was in exactly his point, stop trying to impress people. Not that I was trying to impress anyone with how fabulously well read you are, and you've got all these, stacks of books on hell back here and so forth. Get to it, and it was a bracer. It was a good awakening to kind of have and you need somebody. Just bringing it back around to the creativity. You need that person in your life and in your creative circle who is going to be that directly honest with you at all times, to who aligns with your sensibilities, but is going to open your eyes to the right things. He's been invaluable to me. I'm always nervous to send him something, because if I send him something and then it doesn't work, then it's like, oh fuck. Well, when I go ahead, Drew, sorry.
No, I was going to say, no, Dan, I the same kind of thing used to happen when I would work with other people who were trying to break into comics, and they would describe this like, oh yeah, I'm trying for like a very Bendis style or everything. And I remember eventually this one guy who I just snapped, and I was like, I've read Bendis, I've read Frank Miller, I've read Alan Moore, all of them. I've read their work. You are not them. I want to read your work. I want to read your story. It was the same thing that when James Gunn was doing Guardians, he did a proposal, and it was by the numbers Marvel. And I forgot who said it. He was like, okay, this is good, but I want to see how you would do it. I want to see the James Gunn pitch. And he did it. And then essentially that was Guardians. And they were like, yeah, you're in.
Right. That's it. I mean, you have to follow your flow. While it's a very overstated and sounds almost tropish in terms of like creative advice, I mean, it really is where you work the best, because you are sort of following your own path. You're always inspired by somebody. I mean, that's great. But it's where you just take the charge and just run with it. I mean, I've done marketing work, primarily over the last number of years, and every time I faltered in the marketing work, it's been when I've tried to emulate something else. I got to write it in this style, or got to do this, as opposed to just throwing it up in the air and just saying, nope, I'm going to just go do my own thing, and it's going to be weird and wacky, and then it works out pretty well.
Yep.
When I was looking up to get pictures of you, I saw where you were working on like healthcare at marketing by a horror writer.
There was a few comic people who sort of fell into that zone, which was really weird. That picture that you found was very amusing. Very that was a flashback.
We'll use a different one for the next one. We'll see what we got.
Oh boy. But so if we can kind of also talk about a little bit about Daredevil. I mean, you're coming.
Yes.
Yeah. Absolutely.
You're coming back to the character after a long time, and you're also bringing back the armor.
Yes. Yes.
So go into that a little bit, Danny boy.
Well, these are just, when I was fired off the book years ago, in an inelegant, changing of the guard, not fired because I'd done anything wrong, but, changing the guard and just handled very poorly. And it was kind of over, right? Middle of where I think things were going, and plans we had for the character and other places and blah, blah, blah. But it's over, right? I was a big boy, semi-big boy, then. And it's not like I've sat around the last 20 odd years saying, geez, I wish I had one more chance to write Daredevil. Not at all, But I have had a chance to kind of go back to conventions over the last several years, which I have not done in 20 odd years either. And so it was at Terrificon, not this last summer, but the summer before, where I was standing at the table, much like, when I met you guys. And this friendly guy is coming up and he's like, hey, DG, it's like, oh, hi, how are you? Hi, I'm Stevie Sobalski. And my brain doesn't work as quick as it does sometimes. So it's like, Stevie Sobalski, that name sounds very, editor-in-chief of Marvel Comics,
Yeah.
So he's super complimentary and like, liked your work and, good to see you. Glad to see you on here at conventions. And I jokingly said, well, I've been meaning to call you and pitch you a couple things. And he says, well, a matter of fact, and he starts to describe the idea that they've done what he was calling these nostalgia books, getting folks from back in the day to kind of come back and do things on their characters. And he said, would you be interested in doing something, not even Daredevil, just doing something? And I said, well, I'm no fool. Maybe I could think of a couple things. He says, well, here's my contact info. And he gave me both his Marvel information and his personal email address.
Oh boy.
And said, drop me a line and let's pick this up. So I did, not really thinking anything is going to come of it. And but to his credit, he not only responded after he got back from a couple of weeks of travel that he was on, but he had already been proactive and put me in touch with Devin Lewis, who was the Daredevil editor. Mm-hmm. And he said, so he had sort of pushed it in the direction then of, well, we really think we want you to do something with Daredevil. I want you to talk to Devin. We have an idea. And I was like, oh, okay. And so I got on with Devin, and who was great to talk to. But Devin right out of the gate says, yeah, we want you to do something with that costume from back in the day, right? With that armor. Mm-hmm. And I had never called it armor. I was always defensively like, we never called it armor. And I laughed out loud because I said, you have no idea. And I hope my swearing is something you can edit out.
Oh, no, go for it.
We swear all the time here.
We swear, we smoke, we curse, we laugh, we describe things, whatever you want to say.
All good. But I said, Devin, you have no idea the amount of shit I took back in the day for that costume. Me and Scott McDaniel, who designed it, both. I mean, just an enormous amount of shit. And I remember doing a story conference at a game company. They called me in to talk about how this comic book writing maybe relate to game writing. And we had a great time. We had a great session, nice conversation. They said, why don't you come out to dinner with us afterwards? So we went out to dinner. We're talking some more, and they're like, yeah, what's going on with comics these days? Hey, did you see like there was some idiot who changed the costume in Daredevil?
Oh boy.
So but the dinner went great. No, it was fine. But it never occurred to me, that this would be where they'd want to go back to, because in my mind that was what was going on.
Right.
But I think the toy that Hasbro came out with is freaking awesome, right? I think that redeemed it a little bit, and I think a lot of folks who quote unquote grew up having been exposed to that costume at that point. I think the people who were giving a shit were the people who were living with the red costume forever and a day, right? You can't possibly change Daredevil's costume. How dare you change Daredevil's costume? And then the people who are maybe around today are a lot more jazzed about it because they saw it and they said, wow, that's different. That's got some energy or edge or whatever.
Right.
But for whatever reason, they came back and they said, we would like to do something with this. So I said, okay, well, here's some ideas. And boy, look at what you did, Dan. You wrote yourself into this enormous corner back in the day because you thought you were going to continue writing the book. So you had, had established all these strange world that Matt Murdock was living in. Matt Murdock had a persona over him called Jack Batlin because he had faked his death. Mm-hmm. And what were you going to do with this, this costume and armor? And I said to Devin, is the book about the armor, or is the book, just happens to feature the armor, right? And he was like, probably just like features the armor. But in fact, the more I got into it, it kind of became about the armor, not in a heavy-handed way again, right? But it just starts to stitch itself together. Why does somebody wear armor of any kind, right? Personality-wise, character-wise, what are the things that protect us or give us the strength to stand up, in certain situations, and certainly the ferocity of then the visuals once those started to kind of come in, with Netho Diaz, who was the artist on this, who was completely unlike the artists I worked with before on Daredevil, whether that's Ron Garney or Scott McDaniel or Lee Weeks.
Right.
He's bringing this crazy just fierceness, I think, to the visuals and also to the storytelling. His storytelling is really, really strong. This is written plot style. Most modern comics, to my understanding, are written in that full script way, right? Page, panel, 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 script, script, script. I had written this whole thing, all 90 pages of it, as a plot outline in my mind. Which we can read a little bit if you want in a minute or not. But I thought the next step, because the office had me do a rewrite for a certain reason. There was a change in the page count, and so I had to go back and I had to rewrite that outline. And I had assumed, okay, they're going to approve the outline, then I'm going to go in and I'm going to write the script, panel, 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 panel. And instead I opened my email and there's the first 6 pages. So not only was it an old school story, right, taking place in this retro kind of adventure, but fabulously, to my mind, it's being done in this old school way, right? Because to me, when you're working with a really good artist, and this guy is a really good artist to my mind, I love that plot style because I'm surprised. I tend to write very visually. I'll write even if I'm not writing panel, panel, panel. In my head, I'm seeing panels, but I don't know what the choices Netho is going to make are totally. And so he's made some different choices in pacing and what he's given in terms of prominence and so forth. And so to me, that opens up whole new possibilities when you get it back then to script, right? Because he's sending me the pages now, and now I'm writing the script. Now I'm writing the captions. Now I'm writing the word balloons to fill in. And I've put a lot of them into the plot, but there's one sequence I just got back from issue 3 where I knew for sure what the dialogue and the captions were going to be, and they were pretty good. But when he gave me back what he gave me back, it took me in a totally new direction. And I think it's 10 times better than what I had originally kind of put down there. It's just that, and that wouldn't have happened if I was just writing the script and it's kind of done and one and done. So I'm really excited for it.
And he sent me these the writing for it, and you very, very much differently the scripts for the Axles stuff versus Daredevil. It's totally different, and you have taught me something. We have one of our members of the Owlite Army, John Crissa, is a comic book artist and comic book seller, and he does a lot of art as well. But I have him working on a commission for me for a project for something that I'm writing, and he was like, and I was like, okay, will you do this? He's like, sure, tell me what it is. And I wrote this whole thing, and I'm like, and this is happening, and this is happening, and this is what this person did, and they look kind of like it. And so I'm like, you are so much definitely a writer. What the hell does he look like? And I was just like,
right.
But I put in, that this and the hair is the color of this, and he's like, that helps me none at all. Just describe him. Give me some references and stuff.
Right.
So when you get it back from, but you have, and it's not that I don't trust John. It's the first time I've ever asked him to do something. You've gotten comfortable enough with your artists that you're able to send out stuff, and that they know exactly how you think. You have a very established voice going on with people, and I love that for you. And
if you're fortunate, yes, and if you're partnering with people more so. But I've had instances in the past, I mean, the long ago past, as well, where sometimes you don't know who you're teamed up with, and that person just goes, all the way over there, right. and then you're having to kind of try to rescue the story with the words. I got to write a lot more word balloons and a lot more captions to try to orient this back around this way, because they didn't do anything that was just not that my words are finite, but they just went in a place where it's like, how is the reader supposed to follow what's going on here, right? What is the intention that you're trying to make happen, for this?
Yeah. And
I'm sorry, Drew, go ahead.
No, Dan, finish your train of thought, man. Like I was just you're the guest of honor, man. You're the main dish.
No.
I was just
going to laugh. No, not at all. The joke Delphine is the writer who is describing the great space battle, right? The armada, of the galaxy, is off the cusp of Jupiter, 14,000 warships, cruising in, for attack, while many space champions are in their spacesuits outside the ship. Panel 2, and it's like, it's impossible, right? How do you cram all that? What's your point of view? And that's where you have to, even if you're not the artist, which I most decidedly am not, you still have to be able to see, contextualize, break it down. And then if you have a good partner, they're gonna take it into a better place. I mean, I broke every page down in my mind, probably saying that's 6-7 panels max, and sometimes fewer. And there would be places where Netha would follow that. And not that there were panel counts on here, but there would also be places where he would suddenly say, no, it's 9 panels. And it didn't feel that way, right? It didn't feel cramped. He just boom, went and did this because that's what he was comfortable with, the storytelling, and conversely, I had written a splash on the 3rd issue and he had split it up into 2 or 3 panels. But I actually went back to him and I said, not that I'm saying it has to be the way I said it, but I think you're doing yourself a disservice because you've got so much other stuff going on here. I think you need a splash to open up the story. I think you need the story to breathe at this point. And he took another look at it and decided that's what he wanted to do and went back and played it out differently that way.
Cool.
Awesome. So do you want to do Daredevil reading?
Sure. Yeah. What do we have? We have a Times Square shot, and I think, or I'm not sure.
I have 3 panels from you. The first is him walking down with a split face.
Yeah. Okay. Go for it. Yep. All right. So this is described as, this is a plot, right? So this was page 8 to 9. So this whole sequence was described, and this is the first page of the sequence. So it said, wide shot of Times Square, high up, a video news sign in the foreground. Far below, Matt is making his way back to Hell's Kitchen. The video news sign reports on another sinkhole disaster in another rough neighborhood, somewhere else in the world. But again, good news is that helpful corporations are coming to the rescue. More Villain X villainy natch. So Villain X is the villain. I'm not telling you who's behind all this yet. So then a 2-shot of Matt and Jack, right? So Jack's the persona he's taken upon himself. Split between them to give Matt a chance to relate the situation he finds himself in and is struggling with. Jack is a necessity, but Matt is his reality. It's what draws him back home to Hell's Kitchen for periodic visits on the down low. This straight-on shot splits grandstanding Jack on one side, Matt and his trademark shades and blind man's cane on the other. And then Matt finds himself in front of Fogswell's gym, the old center of his dad's boxing universe. Matt with his head tilted to the side, and you can see that at the top of the right hand. Tilted one side, his hypersenses taking everything in and replaying the sensations of a scene from long ago. So then flashback, which starts where you see young Matt Murdock peeking around the corner, right? Inside the gym from when Matt was a boy. A wide shot, sweaty boxers going at it. Battling Jack Murdock is into it with the gym manager. They're into a bit of a small talk. Thought I saw your kid in here earlier. Jack counters, no, Matt isn't a fighter. He knows better. He's always at the books, that one. It's going to be his mind that takes him out of this hell. Except we see a young 10-year-old blind Matt hiding around the corner in the locker room, sense dropping on his dad. Jack has forbidden Matt from learning how to fight, but this man is his father, the center of his universe, and Matt is intent on learning from him however he can. The manager and Jack Murdock in an argument, which you can sort of see picking up on the third panel there, right? The manager wants Battling Jack to spend some time teaching younger, better boxers. Battling Jack is adamant he wants time in the ring, pointing at a Battling Jack Murdock fight poster. But the manager is brutally honest, and you see that sort of in the 4th panel. There's no matches for you. I'm trying to help swing you some extra cash with this. A realistic if chagrin, Battling Jack agrees, shoulders slumping. Battling Jack in the ring, squaring off with a feisty young fighter. So that's like panel 5, right? The older Murdoch coaching the young talent on the right stance. Young Matt's radar vision of Battling Jack and the younger fighter taking position, which is the 6th panel, which hasn't been treated with that yet. And then young Mac is adopting the same boxer stance, emulating his dad's lessons. And you see that in the next panel over. And that ends the flashback, and then it goes from there. Hell's Kitchen, current day. On Matt, his flashback has him taking up the same boxing stance as from his childhood memory, causing other passerby on the street to cut a wide berth around the weirdo. Close on Matt as he recognizes, no matter the current status of his screwed up life, he's still got to, quote unquote, fight for what matters. So you can see this is exactly what I think is in this description, but the choices are made in a much different way, right? He's changed certain things. He's sequentially moved some things around, all in a fine way. And the flow of it is, introduced certain things to me, which either inspired me or freed me up to write the captions and the dialogue itself in a different way. I mean, I wrote those lines, here, no, Matt isn't a fighter. He knows better. He's always in the books, that one. It's going to be his mind that takes him out of this hell. In my mind, that was going to be the line that older Jack Murdoch says to the gym manager there, right? But it wouldn't fit in the way the panels are, which is fine. And the way the sequence kind of played out ultimately once I saw it, the dialogue gets to the same point, but in a different and better way, ultimately, for what it is.
And do you want to go on to the Electro one as well?
Sure. I mean, that's the last page of the sequence. This was page 8 to 9. This was page 10. So now we're exterior Hell's Kitchen, rooftop night. So you're seeing that at the top on the right-hand page. Daredevil perches, using his senses to reach out and check in on people from his prior life. In his internal monologue, Matt considers what is missing from his life by chance or choice. So he's looking in on Karen Page's apartment window. She's in sweats, working the phone, juggling research papers as part of the anti-porn crusade she's marshaling, which was at this time in this timeline, which is what she was doing 20 years ago when I was writing her. So Dee Dee's radar impression of the same as he takes in what he can, reminded of their time together and what they meant to each other. And then it goes from there to a wide shot of Elektra's penthouse apartment, a wide balcony where she is self-training with grace and deadly efficiency. And then Dee Dee's radar impression of the same as Elektra comes to a sudden stop in her motion, sensing something. Her sigh is up at the ready. Matt's VO voiceover captions take a certain pride in being able to check in on the ninja without her completely knowing. So you're going to see something, though, that Netho did in panel 2 and panel 3, 4, 5, and 5. He's actually got Daredevil not like sensing this from across the rooftops, which is what I had thought in my head and intended. He's actually got Daredevil sort of like lurking just outside the window, which, if I was a real prick about it or something, I could say, well, that's not what I wrote. That's not what I wrote. It's got to be just this way. But, what it ultimately ended up saying to me, was, hey, it looks good. I don't have a problem with it. He made a different choice, or maybe he understood it differently. Whatever the case, it allowed me then to introduce a line or two where Murdoch Daredevil says in his internal monologue, I don't have to be this close, but I want to be. Right. I could sense these people from across the way, maybe from halfway across the city, whatever. I could smell their perfume or feel their warmth or do all these things that his hypersenses allows him to do. But because he's there, then I got to introduce that line. I want to be this close. Right. These are the people I miss and desire and so forth, which actually made it much more interesting and emotionally intense, if you will. By looking at it that way and then writing it that way, as opposed to, look, I'm Daredevil, I'm across the rooftop, I can pick up on everything and just, know that she's moving and she's there and Karen's in her apartment and all that kind of stuff. So to me, a great effect of this plot script sequencing.
Yeah, I can't wait to see that ink or colored. That's
it's gonna really pop.
Gorgeous.
Yeah, it looks great colored. I just saw the colors the other day, and I think they've started to send some of them around to some press, and it looks great.
So I have a question, Dan.
Yeah.
Because when fans are reading comics, very often when they're reading them, they hear them in voices that are attached to portrayals. You know, how the characters are portrayed in live action, cartoons, and whatnot. Like how it's hard for fans who grew up in the 90s to read a Batman comic and not hear the late great Kevin Conroy or Mark Hamill.
Sure. Yeah,
so
yeah.
When you're writing, do you hear, like, when you're writing Daredevil, you know, and you've played in Daredevil's world, so you know Daredevil, Kingpin, you know, Karen, all that. Are there any, like, how do I say this? What voice do you hear? Is there a portrayal that you hear or see, or is it a character that you feel that in your head that's the voice of Daredevil, or the voice of Wilson Fisk or Bullseye or whomever?
I'll tell you, one of the many things I'm enjoying about this conversation is a question like that, which nobody's asked me before. You know,
you're welcome.
So, thank you. You know, yeah, sometimes you cast people, right? You know, you cast people in your head, and so is going to be this, and so is going to be that, or so already is. Oddly enough, I never did, you know, for any of them. And I found that, but when I'm writing them right, which I feel like I am doing with this series, there'd be issues I could point to where I felt like I was forcing the words into their mouths more. This, I feel like it's just kind of channeling in a lot of way. I have my Ouija board, you know, all set for the Halloween season. But you know, so it's not so much the person, right? I'm not hearing Charlie Cox. I'm not hearing Vincent D'Onofrio, or Ben Affleck, you know, or anything, you know, there. But I'm hearing a type, you know, the last issue of Daredevil V1, right? Whatever, which was 380, which before they moved it over to the Quesada, Jimmy Palmiotti, you know, run and relaunched it. You know, they asked me and Lee Weeks to come back and do that last issue. The editor did, Tim Toohey. You know, everyone was treating it like a lame duck book, and Tim was like, no, I want the book to go out in style. And you know, to his credit, he gave me and Lee a chance to do one more run on it. And there's a courtroom scene in there I wrote, which, you know, is a kind of a prose writing style that I was experimenting with, which worked in that issue. But I said, you know, he speaks, you know, Matt Murdock speaks in the courtroom, and you know, instead of him just having this commanding, like, you know, elegant, you know, cultured, you know, whatever voice, I just wrote in my head, it's this gravelly, you don't want to hear that fuck with you voice, you know, like that dare you, you know, type of thing. Like it's got a crunchiness, you know, to it, which I think is the thing. And you know, the Kingpin is just this echoing, you know, imperious, you know, sort of baritone, you know, to me, which is not surprising necessarily, but it's not casting. It's just more feeling sort of the flow, you know, that goes with it. Feels right. And I let them, you know, run with it. And I've been lucky with these guys to be able to step back into it. Because certainly there was a certain sense of not the soul crushing nervousness, but certainly like, oh, wait, how do I do this? And do I still know how to do this?
So, Carrie, how much more time do we have?
We're here for as long as Dan's good with.
Cool. I was like, we're on a minute 30, and I was like, oh, okay, cool, because we can keep this going. I mean,
I don't want to take over any more time than you have to give us. We're just having a good time here.
You guys tell me. I mean, if you got some more stuff to cover,
no. Oh, damn, we can talk.
You.
Oh my God, can we talk? We can talk.
We
It's funny that you were saying about how you described Wilson Fisk's voice, because I didn't watch the movies, so I don't have anybody to link it to. And
Right.
this is so goofy, but I'm playing a Marvel Puzzle Quest game.
no.
And
Okay.
yeah, Drew's just like, oh, for Christ's sake, you should talk about that again. And last night I had to get one of the, like, basically not the boss fight, but pretty much the prelude to the harder than the boss fight prelude was Kingpin with just one Magia guy and then Loki.
Okay.
And then for their backup support, they had Magneto. And it was horrible because they are all about reorganizing and taking away everything that you have when you're trying to fight them.
Oh, nice.
But
Sure.
Nice.
but I swear at the game while I'm playing it, and so but when I swear at the Kingpin, I have to swear very properly for some reason. I always, because he's got his suit and he does his things, and even his like moves are standing and being very powerful and
Right.
showing up and looking down
Yeah,
at you.
sure.
So
Yeah, it's got a little bit of murder there. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. It's like how I always think of the Kingpin before Vincent D'Onofrio just did a great job with it in Daredevil. I always heard how like the Kingpin was how he was in Spider-Man the animated series, just very regal, but like you said, that deep baritone where it was I am order, but if you fuck with me, I'll bury you.
Right.
Yeah,
it's interesting in the Spider-Man Spider-Verse one, he's got like a little bit more of a kind of mobster baritone approach, which is interesting, which fits the Sienkiewicz illustrated style that they sort of lifted for that. But yeah, I mean, I never took the time to kind of cast them, probably because I was still so dumbstruck that I was doing the book at all, that it was just like, just keep going until they notice.
Yeah.
just keep going, keep swimming.
So and then another thing that I was going to say, Dan, is that because you were talking about the heat you had to deal with for Daredevil and quote unquote the armor, because you keep using armor, and I'm like, well, it looks like he's on the armor bandwagon.
It's called Black Armor at this point. It's like,
I know.
Like I'm all in.
Yeah.
Sales wants to call it Black Armor.
Yeah,
I had 15 different titles for this story, and so they want to call it Black Armor, and they're going to sell it. I'm the first person to call it Black Armor.
Oh no! Listen, I know you're on the list for the pre-sale for the statue. I got you, buddy, on that one. But I think the thing that you point out is something that I very much vocalized on splash pages a lot. Is there's this comic book conundrum with fans, because a lot of their characters they talk about, they get annoyed because they're like, oh, I feel the character's doing the same thing over and over and over and over again. And then when you have people who's like, okay, we're going to try something different, we're going to go, then it's, what is this? This is horrible. The character would never, all this stuff. And then they go back and like, well, the character's doing the same thing again. And it's just, again, I've been a fan for a long time. So I've seen the stages, the fads. And eventually at some point, because I've stood online waiting to meet writers like yourself, and I've made line friends. And I've heard all the explanations, and I've had to tell off a few people, because this one guy, he was just bitching for about an hour, and you're waiting on a space for an hour, and I have ADD, so standing anywhere for an hour is a hell of a Hellraiser thing.
Right.
And eventually I told him, I said, you know what? Why don't you take the time to go to school, be a writer, get an internship at Marvel, which, considering that you are, your thing is going to be very difficult because you're so fucking opinionated, and rise up the ranks, and then get to the character, and then you can write it your way, and then you can watch the book go in the fucking toilet, because no offense, you have no idea what they're doing. Okay. And honestly, it's very simple, buddy. If you don't like the direction of the book, don't fucking buy it.
Well, yeah, there's that, right? I mean, that's a pretty big thing. Like, don't buy it. Don't give it your support. Don't give it your money. And that's you vote with your pocketbook.
Right.
but
I mean,
it's hard. You know, these characters have been around for Daredevil. I mean, 60 years almost. I mean, it was created in the 60s. You know, is right. So there's only so much you can do. So you gotta,
there's passion with it. I totally get it. I mean, people are passionate about characters, and that's what I benefit from. People are passionate about Daredevil, and they get, they don't want to be challenged by somebody doing something that they don't like, or the wrong somebody doing something different. If so and so writer changed it, then it would be okay. Such and such writer, myself or whatever, changes it, maybe it's not okay. I don't know.
Right.
But you also, I'm always amused over the years how many people, acted like these things were mandated to us. Like, oh, Marvel made you change the costume. Oh, Marvel made you do this. It's like, no, we did it. I take full responsibility for it. We did it for very commercial, practical reasons because we needed to sell the book. Okay, so we made choices to do that, and then we came up with the best reasons that we could to justify it for the story, which I think we did. I stand by that.
Up in Hell's Kitchen, and you can't just run around in your jammies all the time. Ask Spidey.
Well, I mean, we threw him into a situation where he was going up against such a multiple threat level of a high level at the same time. It was really just kind of like how much can I keep cranking the dial up? And at a certain point, the guy who's got a law degree and everything else has got to say, this doesn't make sense. If I can't survive, if the spandex can't survive, I can't survive. If I can't survive, I can't help the people I'm trying to help.
Right.
So let me buffer myself, and that was why it was, an evil little thrill when they finally got to the TV show, and he gets his outfit, and his outfit is, guess what? A little bit more buffered and plated than just some red jammies. It wasn't this costume, it wasn't black armor, but it was substantially more substantial than just a little slip-on jumpsuit.
Right.
And so we made it work, and we had fun with it, and
that's all that matters.
And that's all that matters. And now people we'll see, but people seem to be getting a big kick out of the fact that the costume's around. So
and it's even funny because, like, I've read stories about creators like you who have been in the industry a long time, and they're talking about where they're at conventions and maybe people weren't feeling their run or whatnot. But for me, I have disagreed with directions of characters. And I'm into a point where I would say I've loathed a series or a miniseries or whatnot. But some of these people, I don't get it. Like, how do you threaten somebody? Like, how do you walk up to a writer and just be like, oh, you're a piece of shit for what you did to? And I'm just like, I'm sorry, did I miss something? Are you Matt Murdock's keeper? Are you like his bodyguard? Like, did I miss something? It's like these people, they think that their love of the character grants them this guardianship. Like, suddenly it's like, I am the parent, and how dare you do this to my child? And I'm just like, it's a fictional character, right? Like, no matter what Dan does, Daredevil will go on, and he did.
Right, and he did. But I think what you said earlier, fortunately, I haven't had to deal with that in my latest run at conventions. But I mean, in the olden days, for whatever reason, I did get, I think, a lot more people coming up and just sort of saying, you suck. It was the pre-troll, environment, maybe now since people can do that so easily online, it's not as much fun anymore, but I would never let them leave until tell me why I suck.
Right.
Like, why do I, like, now, fine, break it down, like your challenge, Drew, in the sense of, like, get the job, go do it better, whatever. Tell me why I suck.
Right.
What sucked about the story? And maybe you're right. I'm probably much more critical than you are. I know I'm much more critical than you are.
Right.
But that would set many a person back on their heels, and then engage in a dialogue, and we would have a conversation. about
Right.
it. You know, it made them think about it, not just that emotional reaction. I hate it that you made a comedy story, or that you did this, or your story made no sense, or you changed the costume, or whatever it is you did. It made people have to think about it, which is the challenge I would just put to anybody on that in that level. It's a challenge I put to myself. I mean, I'm being very, very. I would always be very self-critical, you know, as much as I could possibly be. But to the point where I probably didn't read many of the things after I wrote them because I was so scared they were that bad.
That seems to be a bit of a thing where with you with let's say with Rise of the Midnight Suns writers, we'll say
well,
you and Mr. Mackey
did Howard say the same thing?
Yeah. Well, I remember at the panel when people are asking me, he's like, I don't read it after it gets handed off to somebody else because I don't want to have to say bad things if I don't like it. And you were like, you know, somebody could actually write it well. And he's like, but it wouldn't be me. So, and I get where he's coming from. Like, you have your baby, and then I'm assuming he isn't just that arrogant that he's just stating, you know, they're going to take it somewhere, and it's not where I would have taken it.
No. Howard is incredibly very talented and very self-effacing. So I mean, yeah, very funny.
And I will say this: if you do, for those who haven't watched this panel, it's on the Splash Pages YouTube page, and I will say the whole panel is great. The energy is fantastic, but my God, you three, your faces, especially when you get asked an asinine question, are just like I have to get a snack or I have to pour myself a drink, because that's the comedy, is because you're trying to be nice because this is a person and they sat through you guys talking about your careers, like, you know, whatnot. But you're just like, you just sat through 30 minutes of us talking about us, hyping ourselves up, and this is what you come up with. Yeah, so how did you get into comics? I read some. I don't know what to tell you. Like,
well, it wasn't the audience. We're there for the audience. All you people in the audience were terrific. Those questions were your questions. The Ariel, or you know, whatever the costume was. You know, she had some very, you know.
She actually won the costume contest.
Did she?
Yeah.
Did she? I wasn't.
I recorded that too.
Was hoping that. But yeah, it was just like, it takes 10. This is the thing we left that panel, and you know, I think the three of us were like, worst moderator ever. But and it wasn't that, you know, that's not a condemnation of the person as a person. It's just, it's the lack of preparation, right?
Right.
It takes 5 minutes to
do the research,
whatever, Wikipedia these three guys, and then just ask some pointed questions about not how, hey, didn't you all dig the Moon Knight TV show? Well, maybe we did, but you know what? Terry had nothing to do with the Moon Knight TV show. Why not ask Terry about, like, what would he have done if he'd been able to explore all the things they wouldn't let him explore?
Right.
You know, when he opened that door and they said, oh, they wouldn't let me go through there, it was like, oh wow, that's kind of weird that he got that handcuffs put on him. But if you had been able to do it, what would you have done? Right.
I just loved it. It was so Moon Knight, and you know, I only wrote one, you know, going through, and then did he even know that you didn't actually write?
He didn't even know who I was. He had no clue who I was. I would guarantee you he didn't have a clue that I had done anything.
This is a segment we like to call Drew Moves.
Yeah. It's got some 3D stuff going on.
But yeah, it was just okay. So you didn't write for it at all, and I felt kind of bad because when I jumped in with my questions, then I was kind of cutting Terry off because we went into the Midnight Suns, and
right. And originally it was supposed to be sort of like a Midnight Suns-y dark corner of the Marvel Universe panel, which was perfectly appropriate for then Terry to be part of. You know, he was kind of surprised that he had been, quote unquote, hijacked into that panel. But, you know, we could all play in that space. That was all fine. You know, it didn't have, Moon Knight's dark, and Night Stalkers was dark, and Ghost Rider was dark, and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, definitely.
Plenty of territory to play in. But yeah.
Here's a question: of all the things in the Daniverse, is there something you hope to get to write more in the future? And I use Daniverse on purpose.
I then throw a TM on that for yourself and register it, and then I'll have to pay you anytime it's used.
There you go.
It's I think it's probably like a longest shot of the longest shot, but if I do get a chance to corner CB again at some point, if everyone's happy with this and this does well, I mean, my spirit animal, of all the characters that I worked on, was this character Terror Incorporated, which was sort of like this mercenary boogeyman who could take other people's body parts and absorb their abilities, and then also the emotions of those things. So it was incredibly violent, snarky, just blast, to work on as a character. It only lasted 13 issues or so. And then they brought him back as, odd side characters, that I haven't worked on, but that would be a fun character to return to and do something else with, in that same way of letting him write more of himself. But in the meantime, this is proven to be a lot of fun. So I'm very happy with, like, not just getting to do Daredevil, but fully embracing this Black Armor and sort of being, the reintroduction of it. I was joking with Netho, I think, and maybe the editors the other day, I said, just with all these variant covers alone, there's more of this Black Armor than there's been in the last 20 years. All just Marvel sort of put this thing on the shelf and treat it, the look kind of the group at that point, they went out of their way to sort of destroy it, literally, like in a kind of a comical Warren Ellis issue, and then never picked up on it again, which is silly to me. Like, you spend all the time and money and effort to create something. He could have said, I don't need this anymore, and put it like in a trunk somewhere,
right?
And then maybe pull it out like the Spider-Man Black Venom costume every now and again or something.
Yeah.
But instead they spit at it and acted like almost like we had done something in a rogue mission. This was a carefully planned thing with the editors. This is a carefully planned thing with PR and sales and and the creative team and such. So and ultimately, in our mind's eye, he was going to go back to the original costume at some point. Right. That was probably going to be like issue 350 or 375 or something. But that's the fun thing about this storyline right now is, people were saying, oh, do I need to read Fall from Grace? Do I need to read this? Do I need to read that? I said, no, all you need to do is imagine that there were more adventures that this character got into wearing this costume than were told at the time, right? As opposed to the 3 or 4 storylines that I did in the Warren Ellis Laugh-a-thon. Just imagine that there were many more adventures that there was, and that's all it is.
Everything that happens.
Well, right, and now you get a chance to see another one.
Well, I think, if I can offer just kind of maybe a little perspective on it, I think it's because, around that time, it was an era of excess. There was always a lot, and Marvel was very much kind of following the trend that you saw around that, shoulder pads, tons of pouches, just, and I think eventually they started to realize that while at one point those kind of books were selling like gangbangers, eventually that fad ended, and they kind of like, okay, we got to walk away. This is kind of ridiculous. Like, I think at some point they looked at it as, we are being too ridiculous, and that's saying a lot about comics. So we, like you said, like around that time, they're like, oh, comics need to, we can't be silly. We got to be dark. we got to be gruesome. Everything.
Sure.
It's like how DC loves doing it. Everybody needs to be Batman. I was like, if everybody's Batman, then that makes no fucking sense because then DC is just loaded in darkness. It's like the point of it is that he's Batman, everybody else is it, and they bounce off each other. So also, sad point is I thought you were going to say we're going to have Daredevil Batman 2, which I was like, yeah, let's go. But no, it's fine. But that actually segues into a point I had because I know one of your frequent collaborators was Scott McDaniel, who you've brought up. Yeah. And I've wanted to meet him for quite a while, especially since I've read a lot of his work that he did in the 90s, especially with Chuck Dixon on Nightwing, in the 90s. I loved his style. So when I saw that he did a lot of your Daredevil and Batman, I was like, oh, sweet. Like more Scott McDaniel. Like whatever happened to this guy? I would love to see him at a con and just pick his brain about his style, the very, very energetic that worked for Daredevil because, you know, it's a very fast thing and his style was very detailed, but it had a nice cartoony bounce to it. That I really liked. So I think, to my point, Scott McDaniel's awesome.
Agreed.
And I think it's funny because everything always comes back. Like, and I think that's the thing, like you said, like, why throw it in the cellar and pretend it's like the redheaded stepchild cursed to live under the stairs? Why not just put it in a closet in a box and just say, you know what? We'll come back to this. Like, oh, right. The armor. Like, right. Let's bring that. Like, yeah.
I have never had a conversation and probably never will have a conversation, you know, with the powers that took over, you know, the Daredevil character, you know, at that point, who sort of forced my exit.
Yes.
So this is strictly conjecture, you know, and based upon absolutely nothing, you know, except that. You know, I just think that they thought they were taking over the character and they wanted the character to be the known street entity, you know, in the red outfit, and they wanted rid of this thing as quickly as possible, you know, with the most quote unquote efficiency as possible, wipe the slate clean, get rid of all this stuff, which, you know, in all fairness, was a fair bit of baggage that I was willing to handle because I had come up with it all.
Right.
But, you know, if you want to get rid of it and you just want to hit reset, then just hit reset, I guess. But again, I would have hung it up in a closet, in a secret closet, of course, behind a bookshelf, as opposed to consciously destroying it, literally spending 22 pages of a Brit pissing on this costume and shredding it with scissors and saying, what was I thinking? How stupid is this? You know, you're cutting up a biomimetic, you know, armored costume with scissors. Well, let's leave that alone. But you know, just to kind of like take the piss out of it. And then after that, you know, Mark DeMatteis, who I love dearly as a person and as a writer, you know, does a 5 or 6 issue run where Matt is confused. He can't keep track of, am I Jack Patlin? Am I Matt Murdock? I don't know. And it's just like, it's not that complicated. You know, it wasn't that complicated. I'm proving it's not that complicated right now. There's not any confusion. What I just read to you wasn't very confusing. But I think they just wanted it to be
it like, wasn't
dismiss it. Get rid of it. You know, just get it out of the way. And you know what? It's like, here's the thing. It's work for hire. It's a character I don't own that I got to be a shepherd of for a small amount of time, which I'm very grateful for. And now I get to shepherd this story here, and I'm having a great time. The editorial team is being very giving and encouraging, and they've taken my story points and said, well, that's great. Why don't you do A, B, C, and D? Oh, shit. Those will all make it better. So, yes, I'll do A, B, C, and D. And you know, so I'm like, as far as I'm concerned, it's a chance to have a fun time with more skill. I think I have a lot more skills than I did then. And I'm a lot more command of my abilities. And so it's it's a serendipity I wasn't expecting, which is the best kind, right? You're not looking for it. I'm not pining for it. I'm not scratching at the glass and saying, "Let me back in." And maybe the best advice I got, not that I needed advice, but I went out to lunch with Fabian Nicieza,
great.
around about the time that name drop, total name drop. Around I was working on this. I don't remember at what point, and I wasn't bitching about anything or sort of like we were just sort of talking about it, maybe some directions it might go. And he said, based on things he had done, he said, just write it like you just never stopped writing it. Just kind of just put yourself in that mind state that you never stopped writing the book, and not that you need to pick up on every thread and like continue that storyline in that same way. I'm not doing that. But I found that was like a really kind of just chill like attitude about it, and I got into that zone and then unpacked some really interesting things, and that mindset has allowed me to navigate around some not bumps in the road, but just some things we've had to deal with. We thought we could use that character, we can't use that character. Page count was this, now the page count's that. Okay, right. So you adjust.
Yeah, there you go.
And I noticed, and this is kind of slightly changing topics a little bit, but the digital copies are coming out months ahead of when the print copies are coming, which it makes sense. You have it ready to go. Release
are
it,
they?
get interest. Well, as far as I could tell, I think that I was going to order people some of the Kindle versions, and their release is set months ahead of when the release, at least when I was first looking at the comic. I might have been looking at a website that wasn't updated.
Because the comic is supposed to come out 11/22, and I just saw the last proof. I just saw an unfinished proof of the lettering, and I know it's not finished being colored yet. So it could, ostensibly, but I would think that's kind of odd. But maybe
it might be that I was looking at a page that was giving bad information.
Mm-hmm.
The internet is a scary place, Kara Sanders. It is a scary place, full of treachery and evil and misinformation.
It does say, in November, and maybe it was just I think it might have had something to do with Amazon, because there's.
They might not have had the right shipping date of the
indeed
of the print thing, and I don't know. I mean, who knows? That could be the case, but I would think that's unusual. But
so, Carrie, I'm sorry. I also have a question. Just one more, and then Jenny will take over for all my questions, because she has literally said nothing but be extremely enthusiastic for the last 20 minutes. And don't think I didn't notice that, Jenny. The last question I have, among other things, it is the horror season. It is the spooky time. What is on your watch list for this season? Since I would assume you wrote some Hellraisers, so you probably enjoy horror movies. So
I love horror movies.
There you go. So what are the some that you like every Halloween season comes by, you're like, we got to watch these. Like what's on Dan's horror list?
Things that are on my horror list that I love. I don't know that I'm going to watch them this season again, but I will tell you what I'm watching now. The Thing, Carpenter's The Thing. It Follows, like, scares the shit out of me. I think that's an amazing tight, nasty little movie. The original Evil Dead, and Evil Dead 2 and Army of Darkness are always on that hit list. The Fly, I think, is a great operatic film, which I love dearly.
Is that the original or the Cronenberg?
The Cronenberg, anything Cronenberg you can slot in there as far as I'm concerned. But right now I'm watching The Outsider, which is creeping the shit out of me and feels to me like one of the most. When I saw Silence of the Lambs years ago, on opening night, I thought that was the most pitch perfect movie adaptation, because it just hit all the right notes. It felt like what I had read. It carried that sense of location and dread and powerfulness of like the characters and the investigation. And now I'm watching The Outsider, which the Stephen King book, if you're not familiar with it, which was an HBO series. I'm not finished with it yet, but I'm feeling that same sense of place and translation, that I remember. Because I think that was one of his strongest. I love Stephen King, up, down, left, right, all directions. He's sort of been my go-to like author, like from
nice.
It's like one of the few authors I'll just continue to buy the hardcover books, no
Fair
matter
enough.
what. But I remember, and I can find something to appreciate probably in every one of his books, but The Outsider was the more recent one that I felt like this is just a terrible, and I mean terrible in a good way, like dreadful.
Right.
It's a dread-filled story. And that's how I'm feeling with this watching of this show right now.
I share your love of Stephen King. So I know, Dan, I don't know if you have Hulu, but Rose Red is on Hulu now.
I've heard good things about Rose Red.
Yeah,
and
so
the Boogeyman's on there too.
Yeah, so those are on my list. So that's tomorrow's viewing. So
excellent.
And it was Amazon. It has the Kindle release going on November 22nd, and for some reason it is decided that the paperback comes out on May 7th, 2024.
Well, that's the collection. So they've already put the collection together.
Oh,
like that's going to be the collected edition, like all four issues. So November 22nd is the print release. So print and digital release. So they're going to do the side to side.
Okay, they're just doing the Amazon thing where they don't put things up until certain conditions are met, because that's annoying to go through.
Yeah, Carrie, that's the armored hardcover.
It's like 11:15 almost, guys, and I do enjoy this conversation, but I do have
no worries. Thank you for staying with us.
But I'm happy to go like a final round of any
Jenny, go
questions or needs. Jenny, you got stuff?
Okay.
Put you on the spot, girl. I mean, what? Go.
For the Axles Infernal.
Repeat that one time. I just didn't catch all that.
Which model of truck did you choose for like the Axles Infernal? Peterbilt, Mack, what?
It's Peterbilt. It's a Peterbilt. Carl was very specific about a Peterbilt. I don't know the model, but he did a lot of stalking around truck stops late at night.
I can see
and in the day.
Choose those are the nicer models. That is
he just
one of the prettier ones.
He made his choice. He's the artist. He gets to go with it. But he did a fair amount of. I think he might have bought a model at one point, that he was using for different sort of moving arounds and stuff. But yeah, good catch. Good call.
Okay.
All right. Anybody out there in the audience got some questions? Last chance to say hi.
Carrie, I just want to say, notwithstanding, I also finally realized while we're doing this interview what under my name said, and I hate you.
Has pillows? You just caught
Has
that?
pillows, because this entire time I'm just like, God, I hate. She's right. They're so comfy.
There it is. She knows you well.
Yeah, she does.
Yes, I do.
Our interviews usually go really long, and I get very tired because I spend so much of my energy in the beginning. You'd think I'd conserve, and I'm like, nope, at the gate, right?
No, you're.
And then
I'm like, energy. I have a million questions that I want to learn when I read.
So that she can perhaps ask you, how would you like people to get in touch with you? Where do you want them to reach you at? And
well, the biggest thing I'd ask of folks is, please check out the Kickstarter. Even if you're not sure you want to help support it and back it yet, you can certainly take a look at it. And which is that short little URL I put up there, that bit.ly one. So bit.ly/Axles Infernal will get you to the coming soon site, which then on Tuesday at 1:00 will become the full launch site itself. If folks want to hit me up, I'm still on Twitter. I refuse to call it X. DG Chichester on there. Tag me, say hi to me. ping me on there, direct message me. I don't care, and then you can check out my newsletter at storymaze.substack.com as another way to sort of see what I'm up to and say hi. So I think that's a good combination of things for the moment.
Right, and we should have all of those links connected to this up
They're below on
Perfect.
YouTube and up on Facebook.
and
All right.
sideways on some other planet.
As above, so below. It's all good. It's all good. All good for the season.
And he does
And-
answer on Facebook, I found, and I was so happy he commented on my post.
See, there you
Yes.
go. I try to be active.
He is active. And Drew, where do you want people to follow you?
Oh, I'm on the internet. If you look up this name here, you'll find me. I could respond. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. But I'm on Facebook and I'm on Instagram and I'm with Splash Pages every Tuesday, where I'm basically me doing the thing. I do stuff with Screen Rant. I'm really trying to get back into a writing mindset. It's like picking up bowling balls with your teeth, but I'll get there.
It can be. It can be.
It is, but I'm just generally just tired because life is pain.
I go
Wow.
next because
Wow.
Jenny gets the big one.
We've got to
Dramatic.
end on a higher note than that. Come on.
Yeah. Okay, so
This has been great. I'm so happy, but by God's sake, goodbye.
you can
All right,
catch
love you all.
me on Facebook. The host for this crow is Carrie Sanders, Kari, and if you see a crow, that is me. All of my links are there, so you can find me everywhere. When I'm not here with the Owl Light, I am over with Drew. We are over on the Dorkening doing Splash Pages and Midweek Geeks there. And Jenny, you have the biggest wrap up, so
Do it, Jenny.
take us on out, Jenny.
Okay. My main personal ones are Friday with the Blue Box is my page. Friday Blues Disorganized Library is my group. But you can also comment on Dell's stuff. You can comment on Rasty Slasher and Fake Horror, and you can find me there, and I will help you with anything you need for them or carry on a conversation for them with you. Either way, please read more comic books, stories, or go learn with them. And have an amazing night. And I hope you enjoyed the gift we got to with all these beautiful people above me.
That's beautiful.
That was a wonderful
Thank you very
ending.
much.
What
That was.
optimism.
Great. The cemetery does wonderful things for you. All right.
Yes.
Thank you, everybody, for tuning in tonight. And Tom, since you're the only person who commented, I'll be getting that out to you shortly after we are done. Everybody, go check out the Kickstarter. Share it around if you can't do anything else. Go and check out Dan. He's just amazing. He's delicious.
Thank you guys for this. This has been a terrific conversation, and I look forward to a different one, but with some of the same folks on the 24th. So we'll see you then.
Be great.
All right.
Awesome.
Bye, everybody.
All right.
Bye.